Mrs. Ng learns that she will experience temporary blindness following an eye operation and that it will take her eyes 3 days to fully recover. She is happily married to the wealthy surgeon Jack Ng, so they can afford a maid. May is in charge of all household duties and still finds time to flirt with her cop friend, who has tickets to a concert featuring a well-known singer. May agrees to accompany him, but only if he first does her a favor. She needs him to take Jack's film to be developed because she forgot to do it and doesn't want to get into trouble with her boss. Mrs. Ng's first day of blindness goes well, and Jack takes advantage of the circumstance to tease her. Together, they enjoy themselves a lot. Jack regrettably can't stay with his wife while she recovers because he needs to travel to Macau for a conference. He forgets to charge his own phone, which is why he drops it on the couch, so he takes Mrs. Ng's with him before leaving. Soon after he departs, May requests permission to leave as well because she needs to purchase more asthma medication. She makes a commitment to return soon, though. Mrs. Ng chooses to sit outside and get a fresh haircut while spending time with her dog since she is now the only person in the house. A man named Sam manages to catch the pet just as it is about to run away and quickly ties it to his doghouse. Sam is visiting Jack because, according to rumors, they attended the same high school and Jack later performed surgery on Sam's wife. Sam is invited to join Mrs. Ng for a drink but only helps her enter before deciding to leave. Mrs. Ng eventually nods off on the couch and discovers a storm outside when she wakes up in the evening. Sam rings the bell and says he hasn't been able to get a taxi because of the weather. Sam hasn't returned yet, which is concerning, but May has. Mrs. Ng welcomes him inside without raising any suspicions, shares some food and hot tea with him, and gives him access to some of Jack's clothing. In the solitude, Jack leaps onto the bed in the bedroom of the couple, feeling like a king as he munches on a juicy banana. Sam and Mrs. Ng continue their conversation in the living room after that. Sam reveals that he works at a printing company and talks lovingly about his wife at first, but soon he loses control and starts ranting about how his wife won't let him touch her because of the ink on his nail. He quickly apologizes after realizing what he is doing and makes the decision to leave because the rain has finally stopped. Mrs. Ng tries to resume her regular schedule, but she can't get rid of the feeling that someone is watching her. She makes a choice. Sam is in the house and entering the shower with her, so she decides to ignore it for the time being and take a shower. However, she was right in her intuition. He doesn't say anything and lets his hands freely roam Mrs. Ng's body without making contact in an apparent psychotic game that gives him a creepy sense of control. He can't help but spit some water at her though, which makes Mrs. Ng freak out. Sam flees, but as Mrs. Ng cautiously makes her way downstairs to investigate, Sam reappears, pretending to have come back from the streets. Sam then puts on a show, pretending to be fighting the intruder and ejecting him from the house. Sam then places some sleeping pills in offers Mrs. Ng a glass of milk to help her relax before he leads her outside while continuing to act as if he is watching for the intruder. After he leaves, Mrs. Ng locks the door and tries to use the phone on the nightstand, but discovers that the wires have been severed. The medication starts to work at that point, and she passes out. Sam is eating at the foot of Mrs. Ng's bed when she awakens the following morning. He drags her downstairs where breakfast is waiting, but Mrs. Ng refuses to eat until she has called the police. Sam picks up the phone to play on her amusement and pretends to call the police, but Mrs. Ng finally understands Sam was the bad guy all along and that it was not working. She makes an attempt to get him to leave by saying Jack will return soon, but Sam is aware that he is on vacation because he has been planning this for a year and has also kidnapped May and is holding her captive in the trunk of his car. Sam has a meltdown because a rat bit him, and Mrs. Ng panics and tries to leave the house but discovers that every door is locked. Later, Sam makes the decision to smoke Jack's pricey cigarettes while Mrs. Ng cleans up the mess he just created. Sam approaches her as she moves, teases her, and inquires about her inappropriate inner desires, wondering if she has ever desired a man besides Jack. After a while, he pushes her down in an attempt to engage in sexual activity with her, which prompts Mrs. Ng to defend herself by grabbing a fire poker, but Sam quickly takes it away and bites her neck as a result. A few hours later, Sam prepares lunch and forces Mrs. Ng to eat even though she is not hungry. After Sam admits he cooked the dog, Mrs. Ng quickly gets sick. Mrs. Ng must continue eating while sobbing uncontrollably because Sam won't let her leave if she doesn't consume it all. After that, Mrs. Ng rushes to the bathroom and vomits everything she has eaten while Sam is watching some family videos. She then tries to call out for assistance, but no one responds. She breaks down and starts destroying the bathroom's items so that no one can hear her. Once she has calmed down, Sam approaches her in her room and starts talking about his wife once more. He explains that later in their relationship, he discovered she didn't want him to touch her because she was seeing another man rather than because of the ink on his nail. Sam then commands Mrs. Ng to feed and massage him while he watches television, giving Mrs. Ng some time to formulate a strategy. She begins to act as though she is having an asthma attack and mentions May, but when Sam goes to get the medication from May's bag, he discovers that it is empty because he never allowed her to get to the shop. Sam agrees to buy more medicine because he doesn't want his victim to pass away just yet, but only after putting Mrs. Ng in a closet. Fortunately, Mrs. Ng makes a quick decision and allows a portion of her dress to become stuck in the door, enabling her to open it once Sam has left. She initially discovers her keys, but Sam has destroyed them all. She then discovers the phone that Jack had left on the couch, but the battery is dead. Mrs. Ng starts sobbing until she recalls the charger in her room, at which point she starts to climb the stairs while holding the battery. Sam returns at that precise moment, causing Mrs. Ng to trip and fall due to her panic. No time is left. She quickly slides the battery deep between her legs to conceal it in order to quickly enter the room and prevent Sam from learning about her plan. Sam discovers her without suspecting anything and takes her to her room to force her to take her medication and get some rest. While he is gone, Mrs. Ng has time to charge the battery. Later that night, Sam bursts into the room to confront Mrs. Ng after learning the medicine belongs to May. Sam is forced to admit that his wife had cheated on him with Jack, her doctor, as a form of punishment. Sam kept his affair a secret for 2 years because he wanted his wife to recover, but she ultimately passed away from a heart attack, proving that Jack didn't do his job properly. Sam wants to exact revenge on Mrs. Ng by doing to her what Jack did to his wife. Sam assures Mrs. Ng that she will understand the truth when Jack returns before going outside to smoke when Mrs. Ng refuses to believe it. A burglar enters the home a short while later, finding Mrs. Ng in her room. She uses an umbrella to try to defend herself, but the thief quickly overcomes her and ties her to the bed. He doesn't heed her warnings about Sam because he believes she is lying to scare him away. The burglar then makes his way through the home, stealing a few items, before going back to the room with Mrs. Ng in mind to have some fun. She bites him to defend herself, which causes the thief to back away and bump into Sam. Sam then starts beating the thief up, going so far as to burn him with a cigarette and painfully squeeze his private. Sam then puts a banana in the thief's mouth to silence him and use a pair of scissors to further harm the intruder's leg. Someone rings the doorbell after the burglar passes out. It's the cop, who has come to pick May up to go to the concert. The cop finds it. While Sam is in the kitchen preparing a drink for the officer goes upstairs to look around. He finds someone sleeping under the sheets when he opens the door to the main room, but Sam stops him, bringing the drink, telling him Mrs. Ng is sleeping because she's sick, when in reality the person under the sheets is the unconscious thief. The policeman also discovers a wedding photo, but Sam had replaced Jack's face with his own by using a photo from his wallet. Mrs. Ng is able to force open the closet doors where Sam had placed her in the meantime, but because her mouth, hands, and feet are tied, she can only move forward, very slowly descend the stairs. Mrs. Ng enters the kitchen, uses a tool to cut the ropes, and then uses the back door to flee the house while Sam dispatches the cop. She can see a hazy light on the road and approach it to request assistance as her sight gradually begins to return. Mrs. Ng believes she is safe because the driver has a sharp voice, and when she touches their hand, she sees it is a woman. In reality, Sam is doing this while impersonating May and taking Mrs. Ng back to the house. In the interim, the police officer recalls that he forgot to leave the pictures in the residence, and upon checking them out, he realizes at last that the person he saw wasn't Jack. As the officer quietly searches the home while returning with his gun drawn, he discovers Mrs. Ng in the bathroom. He promises to assist her in leaving, but Sam seizes the opportunity to sneak up behind him and fatally stab her. After that, Sam drops the cop's gun nearby before bringing Mrs. Ng to the couch for some lewd behavior. Mrs. Ng tries to reach her gun while pretending to be into it to keep Sam distracted, but her plan is derailed when Jack unexpectedly comes home. Jack pushes Sam off his wife and kicks him a few times because it is obvious that he believes this to be a routine affair, turning to yell at Mrs. Ng for her treachery as she approached. As a result, Sam has the opportunity to reclaim the weapon and shoot Jack in the leg before forcing him to admit that he had indeed become preoccupied with his wife before she passed away. Mrs. Ng's vision keeps improving. It's still fuzzy, but it allows her to locate a fire poker and hit Sam with it as Sam beats up Jack. Sadly, this is insufficient to deter him, and Sam simply takes the poker from her before returning to striking. Mrs. Ng takes advantage of the fact that Sam appears to still be unable to tell that she is beginning beginning to see again by snatching up various items from around the house and hatching a scheme. She launches a. When Sam steps on some thumbtacks while searching for her, Mrs. Ng surprises him from behind and burns his face with a lighter-equipped spray can. Unfortunately, the spray can quickly stops functioning, forcing Mrs. Ng to sprint to the kitchen to grab new tool. Before hitting Sam with a piece of frozen food this time, she throws some powder at his eyes. Sam tries to defend himself with the fire poker but struggles to see. Unable to locate Mrs. Ng, Sam decides to use the burners to compel her to leave. However, Mrs. Ng jumps on him and stabs him with a pencil before escaping. This prevents him from starting a fire. Her sight finally fully returns when she enters the living room. She pretends to still be blind in order to be able to smash a vase on Sam's head when he approaches her from behind after she notices that he is pursuing her. Then, after returning to the kitchen, she quickly loads the microwave with several beer cans and turns it on before hiding behind a door. Sam tries to follow her, but as he struggles to open the door, the microwave explodes, knocking him unconscious. Sam is actually awake when Mrs. Ng exits, believing that it is now safe to do so. Sam then attempts to attack her. Mrs. Ng takes the fire poker because she has no other option and stab. Sam is there. When Mrs. Ng returns, her husband is in the living room pleading for forgiveness. As Mrs. Ng approaches to yell at him, she realizes Sam had been hiding behind Jack's body pretending to be him. She still won't forgive him because it is his fault that she is now a murderer. This is the final straw for Mrs. Ng, who finally snaps and starts pelting Sam with fire pokers until he is permanently dead. A few weeks later, Mrs. Ng is in the city leading a self-sufficient life. Mrs. Ng shoves a random man away and tells him not to treat women like they're weak when he tries to take the cab she flagged down. And movie ends here. Please like and subscribe.